Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we hunt down people who don't know us or know our names, and we write stories based on their lives. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Well, Seth, you're back.
I am back. And
you want to give us a synopsis of the episode you just listened to?
Yeah.
Which would have been last week's?
Yeah, I can do a little bit of recap. And ironically enough, I kind of missed last week because right before I was going to come in and record, there's some astrological stuff going on, and I mentioned it to Dad, and then he wasn't seeing what I was seeing, so he came over, and then I kind of got caught, looking through his telescopic lens at a couple of different stars or planet things doing something weird. So it was, kind of neat, and then kind of funny that's kind of what some of the episode was about.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of the different things like that. So anyways, so as a recap, I think the last one, what are you calling it? The Song of the Spheres. Music of the Spheres.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have basically kind of I guess you say like alternate world timeline where they, through different scientific discoveries, they find that, like the certain celestial residents of the stars and different planets and metals and things all throughout the universe are, can be read or understand, and in some cases manipulated by certain people.
Right.
I know you guys mentioned like Dune, a lot with, kind of some of the inspiration of that. Then the way that kind of it developed into the world, where then they use this kind of sub-science that was, manifested in like human ability to then, navigate the stars, look for metals, send messages, stuff like that. Right.
Right.
And so it's kind of like that, where you've got, these certain people that can resonate with the, celestial resonance and, kind of get extra knowledge and kind of cartography and, kind of a whole jive with the universe thing. And you have kind of the world set up where, of course, there's, a lot of, let's say, upheaval and, different governments coming and going, and kind of sitting in a sense of like a Cold War kind of state of like a mutual assured destruction, because now everybody's kind of got, kind of fighting for the cutting edge of, the universal space, right? And all the different materials and things. And, they interplace these different people that have these, resonance abilities into their different governments, to fill different roles of power or, structuring, so they can kind of get a one-up on, some of the other, countries, and kind of in a stalemate.
Countries or corporations.
Yeah, corporations, because a lot of you get into the stars, you start mining. And if anybody really, wants to know, most of governments are nothing but, a corporate entity anyways. And so I think,
right,
it just kind of comes out more where then the corporate interest of, certain entities or governments comes out a little bit more, and, frames in different, localized, government on, Earth, and all these different colonies that are starting to pop up as we've started spreading through the galaxy. And I think kind of what you were mentioning was like in that kind of Cold War state. So like inside of all this happening, if like the America government and the Australian government had a big rift, from this point on, like it doesn't matter how good the deal is, like lines are drawn. They don't, like there's no, no bargaining with terrorists to, use that phrase.
The government type is the sort of government, the sort of interaction between human beings when the greater government is at a sort of a standstill of aggression with each other, which sometimes is like super aggressive, like the Americas and Australia, but other times is kind of like the Germans and the Americans celebrating Christmas together in World War I, right? So it's like sometimes it's the super aggressive, and sometimes it's the kind of like, these people above us, they are silly, and we're going to sort of do our thing without sort of letting them know.
Yeah.
Great. I think that was pretty much it, right? Because it was just the two of us, and we did a little bit of world building, but not too much.
Yeah, I think that's,
Great.
unless you
Well,
guys have
what's...
something to add that I might have missed, but
No, I think you did a good job. What story elements did you guys have?
I have hero.
I have prophecy.
I have Ka-Tet members. So, Prophecy Hero Ka-Tet members?
Sure.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right, so to set up the prophecy, it's going to kind of play off of the celestial resonance kind of thing. So
Yeah.
as we started, getting out into the universe. If people are familiar with some of like the zodiac idea, right? So from our perspective, the different astrological signs and people attribute like the day you were born and different, in this
Right.
case, the celestial resonance that affects certain personality traits, certain life paths, so that when certain other celestial resonant bodies are in a certain field or a certain area, it affects certain people in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna kind of go off of that as kind of a basis to, I would say, if this is okay with Reed, kind of where some of these people that have these abilities come from, is the certain people that line up with the certain celestial resonating bodies that attribute um, uh, the different qualities to them, right? So you might have someone that can do a lot of, let's say, like they're used like a weapon, right? So some aggression, um, explosions, very useful in like war
Right.
and like tactical kind of things, right? And they would be, and again, I'm not as familiar with what everything is, but I know like Mars is supposed to be like the Greek god or the Roman god of war, right? And so people born under or that are underneath of a certain sign that has to do with Mars, are thought of to be, more prone to some of the different aggression or
Right.
things like that. So I think some of that affects, some of these different people. And I think what they found as they started studying this, excuse me, is as they started going to some of these other worlds or other planets. So from our perspective here on Earth, we're seeing almost like a 2D image, right? Because from our perspective, we're seeing our zodiac system, right? Our, the 12 houses, the different things,
Yeah.
right? But then as they started going out, right, you're sitting on a different celestial body that's seeing, right, kind of a different set of stars from the different angle, right? And so what they started finding was not only ours, but it made like there's like, I don't know, let's say 7 different ones.
Okay.
As they're starting to explore the universe from the different angles, what they're found is that there's like 7. That just seems like a number that is fitting for something like this.
It's a powerful number.
And so from like our perspective, it would be like a disc. And so we 2D see a disc of, our zodiac system this way, right? I'm making all these, images with my hands, but you can't see that. But imagine like you're looking and there's like a disc, right, with the different
Am I looking at
constellations
the
on.
round part, or am I looking at the thin part?
You're looking at the round part, like 2D, here's the
Yeah. Yeah.
constellations and it goes around in that, the ecliptic circle that we would observe from Earth, right? But
Okay.
from like the advantage point of, I think like the adronomous system or something somewhere else, you're looking at a different set that intercrosses, counter, what would be like perpendicular, right?
Okay.
And so it would kind of make an X, but it's 2 discs, right? In a sense.
Yeah.
And from a different system, you're seeing like a different set. And if you put them all together, they make, I don't have what exactly the image would be, but you would then have like an interconnected system, right? And so from Earth, we've only ever been observing this side, right? But as we've gone out, we
Gotcha.
realize that now some of this other resonance, so it's not just what we would typically see with our zodiac system, right? But with all these other system as they interlay with each other, that makes kind of like the pattern framework of the universe, right? And so as different celestial bodies move through all the different, ecliptic planes of the different systems, right?
Right.
It creates different resonances, and that's where you get, so then someone who's born with this celestial body here, pulls in the resonance, and then they can be more attuned to metal, because in some of the different things you have the different cycles of years. And like the Chinese zodiac is a lot like this too, where you have like a set of years where then it's like the metal sheep, and then you have a fire sheep, and then you have
Right,
um
right.
the wood
Then a
sheep, and
Pikachu.
little Pikachu, electric
Yeah,
sheep.
the
Right.
electric
And so
squirrel. Yeah,
you might have like one subgroup of, the sheep or the tiger. I think this is the year of the rabbit. So you have like the rabbit, you have a wood rabbit, and they're generally going to have certain traits. And then a metal rabbit will be kind of the same, but then more prone or tuned to a little bit different, right? And
right.
then
I can
kind
see
of
what you're saying.
coming through that, you have, that's where then you get these different people that have these different resonances, because it's not necessarily everybody, but the people that then are born on the right, say, point in time where all the different celestial bodies are, in line for that to then affect, their connection to the universe. And so
Yeah.
one of these subclasses then would be like these prophets, right? And so one of the things that these prophets do is, there's a bit of information that had come across about like the was it like the oracles in Greece,
Yeah.
whatever they're called. The one in Delphi was really famous, but there was a whole, like, maybe it's like, no, I can't think of the name, but it's like there was a whole, I say, gaggle of them all across, the kind of the Greco world, right? And they hailed them as these prophets. Well, one of the things that they did is they'd have like messenger runners, and so a lot of the information that people would come and pay for, should I go into business in Crete, right? And in the wool business, right? And so they would collect information from, like we would have high speed access to information, but they'd have like all their runners bringing this information. And so within a couple
Right.
days, they could get their answer, and it would seem kind of, like a special spiritual thing. But then really what half of it was just them compiling all the information on the markets, and the, who was then possibly rumored going to war with who, and what it might
Right.
affect, and the areas it
Right.
might affect. And so it was a lot of information that the regular people didn't have, but because they had a networked system of information, they had this information, and so it made their information seem more divine. Sibylline, I think it's Sibylline oracles is what they were called. Um, but anyway, so these this prophet type people, one of the things they do is, so
Yeah.
instead of like seeing metals, seeing this other stuff, they're seeing like the comings and goings. They're seeing like almost like the prophetic dreams, like stuff that are happening, but like what's actually going on. And so they give out prophecies kind of based on like things that not like anybody would know about, because let's say
Okay.
one government is planning an assault over like this one asteroid belt, right, to take it from another corporation. And so one of them might get wind of that because they're actually seeing it, because it's in the resonance, right? So they're tapped into basically what's going on, almost like security cameras or something. They're receiving the information of what's going on, and then relaying it in places that don't know that. And so that's like they're basically prophets in the sense that,
Right.
they're giving out hidden information, to either whoever will pay for it, or to, the certain ruling class that has them in their court, or their,
Okay,
staff,
so
or
they're a for-profit system.
yes and no. I'd say some of them have been turned for profit,
Okay.
um, and some of them, I, they might just be that, kind of preacher on the street corner, talking, rubbish, because maybe like they don't know what they're seeing, but they're seeing some kind of prophetic, thing. All these
Right.
like,
Right.
like this destruction happening, 7, galaxies away, in this battle that no one knows about, but then they're
Repent,
bringing,
for the end is near.
right, because they're seeing the end somewhere else, in this other system where this,
Right. Right. That leads really well. Is that it?
no, no, no.
Okay.
So I'm just setting up like this prophet class really with this. And so as far as like prophecies go, there's, that's kind of the class they're in. And I would say the main one that's been starting to go around is, just like everything kind of turns in cycles, right? So one of the things, one of the,
Right.
let's say, prophecies that are coming up, and each different person is kind of saying it in their own way, as there's, because that's how I think people interpret things of that nature, is they interpret it through their frame of reference or understanding. And so someone could be saying the same thing, but from the frame of reference that they'll have to explain something, especially if it's something, that, you've never seen before.
Right.
But one of the main things that has been coming up is this kind of impending doom or shift. Some people will bring more of a doom about it, like all this, connection to the resonance will be ending. There's like this, the signs are in the heavens that all these bodies that align every, like, 2,000 years are going to align, and it's going to enter the new house. Because I know, like, that's the big thing right now. Like, at least, like, for us, they all talk, and they've been talking about it since like the 60s and 70s. The age of Aquarius, age of Aquarius. You know, sympathy and understanding. Better blah blah blah. But like the changing of the age, right, from what
Right.
we would be in Pisces, which is the fish, into Aquarius, which is the water bearer, the pitcher, the pouring out. One interesting thing to think about that would be, if you are familiar with, the biblical terms of things, the age of Pisces would have began about, let's say, about 2,000 years ago, which its symbol was the two fish. And as many
That's
people are talking
silly.
about the end of days, the end of times kind of stuff. And if again, Revelations, the bowls that are pouring out of judgment, then you've got the water bearer, pouring out the water, right?
Yeah.
And about 2,000 years before that, in that time frame of things, you would have had the age of Aries that they would have come out from before that, which then was the ram, which then, if you're in the biblical chronology of things during that time frame, is when you would have had like the first and second temple where they're doing the sacrifices, and a lot of that was the the goat or the ram
That's fun.
sacrifice.
So
And then
is there an
at the time of
actual
the Exodus, they would have been coming out of Taurus, which was the bull, which then gives a little bit of significance if you look at it from this perspective of why, let's say, like the golden calf was such a like a bad juju thing, was because it was, they were looking to and honoring, like, idolizing kind of that thing that was a representation of part of an age that they would have been coming out of, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean,
Take it how you.
there's lots of, it's really interesting. The more you look at history, the more you see that it's just kind of the same thing happening over and over and over again. There's a
Yeah.
lot of indicators that we know where things are going and we know where things are coming from, but people, it's difficult to understand and to accept that. But is there an actual prophecy, or
Yeah,
is
so
it
that's why
just
I'm
kind of
sorry
like,
I got a little bit sidetracked. But anyways, the prophecy is, as like the people that are seeing this, they're seeing this age coming to an end, right? And so from one perspective, as the doom and gloomers might be like, the connection to this, social residence, celestial residence is coming to an end, and it might seem, catastrophic, and everything is changing, and the upheaval of the world, and all this stuff. And that kind of, because people like, the extreme, or the most furious fear side of anything like that. But I think at its base, what it's talking about in all these like prophecies coming up is that it's coming to this different, celestial age, and ultimately, and I'll reveal what it is, but ultimately what it is it's shifting the like the frame of, not the frame of reference, but the focal point. And so basically everybody who is connected to that resonance here
yeah,
in this age will
yeah,
ultimately lose it, and it will then open up that thing to a whole different set of people,
yeah.
right?
It's
And
just
so
shifting frequency.
shifting frequency, so now the people that are on this other frequency, are going to get these things as these other people have phased out. And if you look at it from a, the larger celestial thing, you would look at it and go, okay, power corrupts, ultimate power corrupts ultimately, right? And so if you
Right.
had the same people they would get into like a groove of, oh, we always have this, and it's always these people, and it's always, they would then create like a caste system that one group of people always born under a certain star sign, or they'd always have this certain, prestige of power, and then you'd be able to basically, you knew you were born into it because, well, that's where you were born into it. And so with that celestial shift, it shifts every once in a while, which basically will upheaval it all and basically create like a changing of the guard, so
Right.
that over the long, let's say, period of time, and it might be a couple thousand years, but in the scope of things, it does, keep it from being, let's say, landlocked from only one or certain groups of people always having that power.
Right.
And so that's really
So
what the
that's the
prophecy
great
is.
thing that's happening. That's
Yeah.
like it's not necessarily the villains doing, it's just a great thing that is happening.
Yeah. And like I said,
Gotcha.
it's from the frame of reference, some people could take it more doom and gloom if they only want to focus on, the destruction that could happen with it. And some people might be, like it's the new birth, and it's, all new life, and this
Yeah,
this
yeah,
new
yeah.
perspective of it because of the way that they might, choose to, view it through, whatever lens of understanding or benefit that they want to bring about with it. But that's kind of the word on the street, the prophetic, word on
Yeah.
the street, is more and more of them are seeing this, kind of end of one thing, or the end of one and the rebirth into something else that, is kind of at this crucial point of, indecisiveness of whether or not, certain people are going to keep power, or if everything's going to fall apart, or,
Yeah.
stuff
So
like
that
that.
works really well with the Ka-Tet members. So Reed, do you mind if I go in with the Ka-Tet members?
Cool.
The Ka-Tet members are three individuals. They all are sort of caretakers of, they're called listening sites, 1, 2, and 3. These listening sites are ancient, ancient satellites that are tuning forks, right? They're artificial ways to sort of pick up the resonance, right? They were made by some other race that we've never met. They don't even come up. This race died 100 million years ago, right? But we found, well, people, this isn't the government or anything, found these listening sites, and these three individuals exist on them. Now the sites are exactly the same. They look exactly the same. All the controls are exactly the same. So for 90% of the time, they just beam their images to each other, and it's kind of like they're just hanging out, right? Even though they're hundreds of millions of light years away. So they use like quantum entanglement or something like that, and so for most of the time in the book, they look like they're just hanging out in the same room with each other and helping each other on things. These listening sites are unique though because they are not just listening sites. They are also they contain the, what do I say, the biological brain of one of this ancient race. Right, the size of a Toyota Camry. This brain is incredibly powerful and not conscious at all. Right, this brain is not thinking about things or anything. It has been for, like I said, hundreds of millions of years, kept supplied with nutrients and plugged into this site. So not only is this brain able to sort of pick up on these resonances, you know, um, not as fine detail as like a human being who's been trained to do it could do, or this creature could, but more importantly, able to shift or push resonance onto other things. So these three people, listening site 1, 2, and 3, are who the prophetic class of people go to get information. They are who people pay planet-sized fortunes to have probability itself bent to their will. Quite literally, these 3 stations with all of their systems and technology can twist and change the very fabric of reality itself. And things are changing, finally. Like Seth said, things are changing. It's not changing very quickly, but they are changing. And as this age sort of sunsets, these 3 people who have sort of been given this assignment, to just sort of hang out in this satellite and get to know the systems and to use it for the rest of, it's just kind of like a life sentence for the rest of their lives, are finding the very essence of fate and the very essence of destiny and the very essence of Ka pulling them into things that they didn't, requiring their help to save the world or save the universe, where before they were just like exaggerated librarians, just look up boys and girls. But as the story progresses, I kind of imagine it where they kind of see everything that's going on, right? They see everything that's going on, they understand everything that's going on, and they can like push and prod little tiny things to make things different. And so the story will be progressing, and then it'll cut to Jack, Ashley, and Christopher talking about what the heroes are doing and if there's something that they can do, right? And then it'll cut back, and you'll be like, who are those people who are talking, And then the story will go on a little bit, and then it'll cut back to Christopher in listening station 2 as he's typing something in and decides just to go ahead and do this thing. And then it cuts back to the story, and you never kind of figure out who these people are, but you watch as humanity takes over these people and they become they become what's the word? Instruments of Ka, instruments of destiny, right? And they literally have their hands on like matter fabrication systems. Like they can just do anything, but they're very careful because really early on they learn and understand the implication of the power that they have. So by the end of it, they are kind of clued in and they're all really on board to helping. And that just kind of, maybe it's a Deus Ex Machina moment. Maybe it's kind of the groundswell that happens that we love to see when any hero does what's right and people begin to follow him and do, go with him, something like that. And then maybe there's a reveal near the end, maybe they get a message across the board, or maybe it just ends with the listening stations going offline because the giant brains that sort of powered their whole entire ability set are no longer effective because the resonance has moved past it, and now it's just a big old brain. So that's the Ka-Tet members. So they can
Cool.
kind of be added in to have affected something, but they also are kind of the reason why the hero will succeed. Right? So anytime you want to add something crazy in, you can say this was listening station help. Right? That's why Darth Vader came into this world with a Star Destroyer to fight the bad guys or whatever. So Reed, let's hear the hero.
Okay. It's really interesting that you say this because Jerome Edwards of Space Command is our hero, and his 10-year-old daughter had found some content in the digital library, so to speak, and she has become fascinated with the ancient uh, art form called comic strips, and her current favorite is Calvin and Hobbes, and
Nice.
her dad, is Colonel Jerome Edwards of Space Command, as she just dubbed him Spaceman Spiff. So our hero is Spaceman Spiff, according to his 10-year-old daughter.
That's
And
great.
and this is like ancient, she's been digging up this material, and she
Right.
just can't believe, that this stuff was written at a time when there was no, when it was all, in the imagination of a, pre-adolescent boy that's just trying to use his imagination to as an escape to cope with an obscenely oppressive world, trying to squash any life out of him, right? Called public
Right.
school.
Right.
But anyway, Edwards has, he was, and this is really ironic. I was just chuckling. His job, he's tasked with organizing the listening posts, which I just think is really funny. So he is, I guess you would say he's Jack, Ashley, and Christopher's boss. But you know, just the quick history. He is uh, highly attuned to what we, I called in the magic system last time the celestial harmonics, so to speak. And back in the beginning, when this was just getting started, when people were recognizing this, one of the forerunners in setting up the listening posts, was out on a moon of Neptune or something,
Right.
and he was studying particularly close by possible sites of intelligent life, like uh, particularly Centauri Proxima, about 4.42 light years away. He became convinced of that it was inhabited by sentient beings because when he calibrated it against the harmonics coming from Earth, which was obviously really close because he was just at Neptune, but yet far enough away that the dynamics could be measured, so to speak.
Right.
He realized that that because of the unique emissions, for want of a better word, the psychic, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, I'm going to call them emissions for want of a better word. That's how he began to catalog possibly inhabited worlds. But the real stunner was studying TOI 700, about 100 light years away. And he realized that the emissions were not diminished by distance. So that just opened up this whole new understanding of the universe, that the connections can be instantaneous. It isn't.
Right.
That's the ancient history kind of it. Then that entered into this period where this whole, age, so to speak, where they're finding and identifying the people that had the knack of picking up on these things, and training people and whatnot, and then you setting out the ancient listening posts. Well, this has been going on now. I mean, we are close friends with the Centauris and the Proximas, and there's what do they call it? The 18 light years away, they just discovered a Earth-like planet with liquid ocean, and
Yeah.
it's like only 18 light years away. Well, anyway, so Spaceman Spiff, Colonel Edwards, he is picked up, shall we say, I'm going to call it a disturbance in the force, just because we don't have words to call it. But there is clearly an inhabited region of space that has changed the harmonics.
Yeah.
And he's picking up that they appear to have become aware of us, and it's clearly hostile in intent. So he is, he's got access to Jack, Ashley, and Christopher. This guy's an intensely powerful guy just because of his access to information, and plus because he's military trained. He keeps things close to the vest, and he has his, sends things up the chain of command, so to speak, and he has to trust the system that people higher up are going to make the right choices and decide what information needs to be public, and of course all these things play into it because of potential profits. You have people that have invested, the fortunes of generations into great ventures that could, in time of hot war, could just be rendered moot
Right.
overnight,
Right.
or become insanely profitable depending on the need. And so that's where we've got Colonel Edwards or Spaceman Spiff poised to react to the danger.
So my thought was that that the listening posts wouldn't be connected to any government or military because they are too powerful.
Oh yeah.
So they're instead kind of like a third party search inquiry that the government has access to, and they can pay money to have things changed for them if they want. But the people in control of the listening stations are, like there's no one knows how to get to them. No one knows how to, you know,
Right.
you just kind of send out your question in this general direction,
Hmm.
coded in this frequency, and you go into your room the next day, and there's a data disk on your desk, and you're like, how did this get here? Well, they literally found the information for you and then materialized out of nothing the data disk on your desk full of the information.
Right.
It's like you so he definitely, I would say, is in charge of some listening posts.
Right.
Like we talked about ones that had like the metallic resonance all the way through
Right.
the planet. Like
Yeah.
the military runs their own, but these listening posts are phased out of existence. You can't like just fly a ship to these.
Right.
They just don't they aren't real. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
When you were talking about them because of the ancient nature, I have this idea of, like you said, a Toyota Camry sized thing just kind of hurtling through space.
Right.
And like Voyagers, let's just keeps going,
Right. Right.
and
Or maybe they're in the past. Or
mhm,
maybe they Ashley, Jack and Charlie,
Christopher.
Christopher are right before the end of the universe.
Mm.
Maybe that's where they are.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we don't know. That's the point, is that like these these are third party individuals who aren't a part of it. Who aren't a part of the story, but who are a part of the story because they've been given the keys to the reality of the world. You
Right.
know, it's like if you were able to drop in and be flying a B-52, no, excuse me, um, the Black Hawk
Right.
right above Middle Earth during Lord of the Rings.
Right.
You had no bombs, you couldn't land, you could you had no fuel, but you could be there and you could watch,
Hmm.
and maybe you had like a missile or two,
Yeah.
you know, so you could do something, but you'd kind of have to just like watch it all take place because you can't land, you can't take off again, so you're just kind of there as
Yeah.
things are happening. It's kind of my thought process on
Yeah.
those, anyways.
Well, and the other thing that I really was fascinated with when Seth was talking about the idea that, we have the disc, you look up at the night sky and that's the disc that we have.
Right.
And this isn't a new phenomenon that, where the intersectionality of looking at space from a different uh, solar system, for example, on the other side of
Yeah.
the galaxy,
Yeah.
in the way that intersects with the disk, sets up, uh, you know, you have information that's additive and multiplying, to each other where those disks of perspective intersect. The other thing that I thought of just when we were we were carving pumpkins, listening to music in the old, you know, Crosby, Stills and Nash song "Southern Cross," where they talk about making for the trades on the outside, heading across the equator into the southern hemisphere, and the night sky has constellations, whereas the Vikings would, look up and see the Big Dipper and be able to, chart the North Star and navigate by night.
Right. Right.
You cross over the equator and there's the Southern Cross, and all of a sudden you have this whole new disk, and that's just on our little planet. When you start adding in stations Jack, Christopher, and Ashley,
Ashley, yeah.
you're having one of the great advantages that they have is this intersectionality of the spheres of perspective, and and I just anyway, I just really like that. It's for people who know how to use it, you know, like s- like Spaceman Spiff, he's got the military hardware, right? And
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
listening posts, but he has access to this information and cross checks and
Right.
calibrates
Right.
with the ancient, right?
Right. Cool. Well, Seth, do you have a villain? Do you have a bad guy? Besides the changing of the times, Who's going to be the bad guy? Every good story needs a bad guy.
I'm thinking, for something like this that's going on, you could have like a influential, let's say, free agent prophet that, with the rise of this new hostile area that
Yeah,
is kind of phasing into our, let's say, realm of existence. Because if you think about it on like some of that, you'd have, let's say, like the idea of like not necessarily multiverse, but other realities or other things that are existing in this at the same place that yours is, but at a different
yeah,
resonance.
yeah,
And so I think with the shifting of that, what you could be getting, and with that is, you know, some things that are, going to stay in tune to one thing as they phase, literally into, a different universe, the same universe, but different parts that are phasing into a different, I hate to say, not level, but you know what I'm saying, like where it's, at a different frequency of the universe. So there might be this one system that completely loses, phase with Earth, but then they gain,
yeah.
five other, systems as, different ones are, you know,
I thought this
altering
was a
their.
phase out, like certain kind of like certain people wouldn't be able to use their powers anymore, and people who didn't have powers would suddenly gain powers. Kind of like, you know what I mean? Is that not what you meant? You meant like
Yeah,
actually
no, I meant
phasing
that,
out.
but I think you could have both,
Okay.
right? Because I think, with some of that same concept, you could have, because this would play into then part of something that the villain might be tapping into. So if you have like a collective resonance, right? And if they're
Right.
resonating in like a spirit of fear, right? They'll be pulled into that level of the universe that is more destructive, falling apart. They'll be pulled into, that resonating bit, right? Well, as someone or, a galaxy or a collective of area that is then, tuning into, I guess you say, more positive resonance, they would move into then a universe where then the more positive resonances are moving into here, right? Into a different.
Okay.
Does
I
that make
think I
sense?
understand what you're saying. I think
So
so.
that could be going on as, let's say, the shift of like who has these powers and who doesn't have these powers. I think you could have both going on at the same time.
Right. What we could be seeing is we could be seeing a reverse flash sort of situation.
As
Um,
in,
if I understand the story of the reverse flash, he's, the Flash from the DC comics,
okay,
fastest man alive.
Yeah.
If I understand this correctly, reverse flash is basically like from a different universe. If I understand it correctly, nerds, let me know. If I didn't, I'm excited to read about it. But he's like from a different universe, and he kind of comes over to this one to wreck things and break things and generally be a villain, right? So our villain could be from the universe that's colliding with ours, and as they kind of start, and maybe it's a natural collision or maybe it's an unnatural collision.
so I think maybe what you could
He's
have
coming
is,
over.
yeah, because
Yeah,
what I'm saying is I don't. So I think what you're saying with like the Flash, that would be like the multiverse where you exist in an infinite amount of things in every different which way possible, right?
right.
That would be like the multiverse, roughly. And again, nerds, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of it. And so like, have you ever seen like Jet Li, the one?
Yes,
Okay, so basically that's like the multiverse. He exists
absolutely.
in
Yeah,
all these other things, and so then that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like you only exist here, right? So there's other phases of frequency in the universe, right? And so as this shift is happening, you know, areas or people even that are in tune to a certain frequency that
yeah.
they're attuned to could be pulled to a different, like I said, um,
A
like
different place.
a different place that is, as this is shifting and all the different resonance, and then you will phase out of not this reality, because it's like the same place overlapping itself, but not with multiple versions of the same thing. Where then you or a planet or a group of people will phase into, if the resonance of that thing is in tune more with that level of frequency where those things reside, right?
Right.
They'll
They'll
move
phase.
there. And
How is that not a multiverse thing?
well, it could be like a multiverse, but what I mean is not a multiverse where the same entity exists in all these other ones, right?
Just
So
different
Earth is
different
only
place,
in
different people.
one place, right? And so
Oh, okay.
if let's say a prophet has
Yeah,
got the
I
entire
understand what you're
world,
saying. I understand.
everyone on Earth heightened up into this fear mongering, the end of the world, right? They'll, as the shift happens, Earth will phase into a level of resonance into like a different reality, where then let's say Mars might be here and just see Earth kind of disappear one day, right? But
I gotcha.
they're still
Yeah.
in the same place, and they'd still, let's say, exist in a place where then, you know, they're revolving around the sun and, you know, all of that in a sense, but not like a copy of them. They've just moved into
A different place.
a different place. They're in,
Okay.
let's say, technically physically the same place, but not in a resonance. So we could fly through the space where Earth was. We could, you know, do whatever like that. And
Yeah,
they would
no,
still
I
exist
understand
there,
what you're
just
saying.
not accessible to where now these people have settled in, you know, what's resonating in that
Well,
frequency.
I mean,
If that
we could
makes
still
sense.
do my idea and just say that the villain a long time ago from the last time this happened, you know, he belongs to a planet that happened to, and now things are coming back around, and he you know, he made it through, or he's coming through, or something like that, you know, if we wanted to. Otherwise, the villain could, I mean, the villain doesn't have to be a villain, it could just be a collection of bad actors. You know, if we're going to try and make the struggle more the effort to deal with the changing of the age, you know, we could pretend that there's a villain for a long time and then have it really just be the natural order of the world. Kind of like how Wheel of Time ended. Spoilers, everyone. Kind of. But we've been going for an hour now, so we're going to wait till next week to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, please let us know. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or at us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. You can give us tips and tricks of story writing. You can correct us on all of our terrible DC comic book lore. You can tell us how astrology is actually real. We'll listen to all of it. And we hope to see you next time on Wait It Gets Better. Thanks, everybody. Bye.